Welcome to Plain English, the podcast that goes at the right speed for English language learners. Listen now and read the transcript online at plainenglish.com. Now, here's Jeff, your host for today's episode.
Peru's president resigns after months of political scandals. Welcome to Plain English for April 9th, 2018. I'm Jeff, and you are listening to the podcast that goes at just the right speed for English learners. On today's episode, we'll talk about the political downfall of Peruvian President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski and his connection to the Brazilian corruption scandal. At the end of the episode, we'll talk about the English expression, the last straw. If you're listening and would like to read the transcript as you listen, you're in luck because each episode has a transcript available online. Today is episode 36, so just go to plainenglish.com/36 and you'll be able to read along. There are even instant translations of tough words and phrases from English to Spanish, Portuguese, French, and Chinese. plainenglish.com/36. Peruvian President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski resigned last month, the latest political leader in Latin America to fall amid a corruption scandal. The scandal was related to the car wash investigation in Brazil. Kuczynski accepted about $700,000 worth of payments from an affiliate of the Brazilian construction firm Odebrecht. The payments were made for so-called verbal products and contacts. In other words, for his connections. Though he was paid before he was elected president, it was after he had been prime minister and the economy minister, suggesting that he was trading on his influence as a high government official to get a payday from a corrupt government contractor. As ever, the scandal was as much in the cover-up as it was in the actual scandal. A video came out showing one of the president's allies in Congress offering kickbacks to legislators who would agree not to impeach the president. This was the last straw. Peru's legislature is just one house, and support for removing Kuczynski was over the 2/3 required by law. So instead of waiting to be forcibly removed from office, the president resigned. This was an abrupt end to a strange political drama. The 79-year-old former president was a Wall Street banker and held several top political positions in the country before becoming president. He was elected in 2016, beating his opponent Keiko Fujimori by just 0.2% of the vote. But his party didn't have a majority in Peru's legislature. His opponent's party had the majority. To complicate matters, Fujimori's father, Alberto Fujimori, was once president of Peru and is currently in jail, serving a 25-year sentence for directing death squads, among other charges. One reason Kuczynski won the presidency was because people didn't want a return of the Fujimori family drama and worried that a second Fujimori president would pardon the first one. Kuczynski's job as president was always going to be difficult, but his vanquished opponent in the election made it harder. The opposition party, known as Popular Force, dominated Congress and actually impeached Kuczynski once before. He narrowly escaped being removed from office in that first impeachment. But right after he survived the first impeachment vote, Kuczynski pardoned the ex-president Alberto Fujimori, father of his opponent in the presidential election. Why would he do that? The ex-president actually has two children in Congress, Keiko, who ran for president against Kuczynski and lost, and Kenji, who was also in Congress. Kuczynski appeared to make a deal with Kenji Fujimori to pardon his father in return for Kenji's support in the impeachment trial. Kenji and a handful of other members of Congress saved Kuczynski from being removed from office the first time, but at a significant cost. Remember, one of the reasons why Kuczynski was elected to begin with? It was because the country didn't want to deal with the drama of the Fujimori family and the possibility of a pardon for the ex-president. So when Kuczynski himself pardoned the former president, he lost a lot of his supporters. When it became clear in the second impeachment trial that he had accepted payments from Odebrecht, he was left without any friends, having alienated many of the supporters who elected him. He had a 15% approval rating when he resigned. Odebrecht was a big player in the Brazilian corruption scandal we talked about in episode 34 last week. The company admitted to paying $29 million in bribes in Peru dating back to 2005. Many in Peru are now hoping that the drama will settle down now that the vice president, Martin Vizcarra, has taken over. He is seen as a stabilizing force. He was a governor of a small southern region of Peru and had been ambassador to Canada. Analysts in Peru say that he can be successful if he continues the fight against corruption and focuses on economic growth. Before we get to the expression for this week, I wanted to say hi to Ana Maria from Medellin, Colombia. We got to chatting a little bit about dogs, and she has a Labrador retriever called Nino, and it made me so jealous. I always had dogs growing up, but I don't have any pets now. I need to do something about that pretty soon. Also, a quick hi to Jorge from Guadalajara, who wrote me on Facebook, and Rodrigo from Brazil. Thanks for being in the audience and for saying hi. If you want to get in touch with me, you can find me on Facebook and Twitter under the username Plain English Pod, or you can send me an email to jeff@plainenglish.com. Here's an expression you need to know: the last straw. It's related to a longer expression called the straw that broke the camel's back. It's not as common to say that full expression, but the last straw is very common. I want you to picture a camel, and on top of that camel, you place straw or hay like dried grass, piece by piece, straw by straw. Each piece of grass is very light, but when you put tons and tons of them, they weigh a lot. And eventually, you will put a piece of straw on that camel that will break his back. And so that last piece of straw may not be too heavy all on its own, but it was the one little piece that was necessary to break the camel. So, in English, when you have a situation where things are accumulating and the final thing was the one right before a bad outcome, that final thing is the last straw. It's the straw that broke the camel's back. It might be light all on its own, but when combined with everything else that camel is carrying, it's enough to break his back. Earlier in the episode, I chronicled all the trouble that Peruvian President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski had gotten himself into over the years. A lot of the things he had done were pretty bad, but no one single thing was so bad to ruin his career. Instead, it was the accumulation of scandals. Pardoning the ex-president, cutting deals with congressmen, accepting $700,000 from Odebrecht, and then the last straw. A video came out showing members of Congress in Peru appearing to trade kickbacks for support for the president. That was the last straw, the last thing in a long line of scandals that finally caused the president to lose all his support and resign. It shouldn't be too hard to think of a few good examples. Let's say you're a manager at a restaurant or a retail store, and you have one employee who's always late. He just cannot get to work on time. And then, on your busiest day of the year, he comes in a full hour late. Being an hour late might not be too serious if it happens once, but after coming in late so much, this time is the last straw, and you fire him. It was the last in a long line of small incidents that leads to a bad outcome. Back when I was living in New York, I was in an old apartment that wasn't very nice. It didn't have good air conditioning. It was on the 5th floor without an elevator. The landlord never made good repairs, and it was really expensive. Then, my downstairs neighbor started complaining about me unfairly, and my landlord sent me complaint letters in the mail. That was the last straw. I decided I had to go get a new apartment. I could live with a grumpy neighbor, but not after all the other things I was unhappy about. The noise complaints were the last straw, and I moved out. Remember, the last straw is the final thing that causes you to run out of patience or that causes a bad situation. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Plain English. Just a quick reminder as we wrap up that I send out emails for every episode, and the emails have links to articles in English about the main topic and an explanation of one additional word or phrase from the episode. If that sounds interesting to you, just go to plainenglish.com/mail and fill in your information. Thanks again for listening. JR, the producer, and I will have a new episode for you on Thursday.